Imagine a time and a place where for 3 to 4 months out of the year, you could not get food if it ran out. There's no grocery store to go to. You can't pick up a phone and call anybody. There's no neighbor that you can just walk down the street and ask, hey, could I borrow some food? There's nothing there. This is a very real possibility for people in the northern colonies in early America, where winters were very bleak. You would essentially spend the entire year working up to this moment where you had enough food stored up to make it through the winter. So some of the responsibility for you if you're going to get your household through the winter is preserving food. And so in that situation, you're going to be potting meats and you're going to be putting meats in the pies and you're going to make these different dishes that are essentially canned, although canning wasn't happening, but sealed off in some way. Cheeses could last for a long time. And then there are also things that you can just store back, like root vegetables, where farmers would be thinking about, okay, what is going to be hardy enough to make it through the winter? And they would be harvesting those crops and drying them out and then storing them in a cool, dry place just to make it through winter. So over the last week, and especially last night, just because I'm so interested in this topic, I was going through a bunch of historical gardening books. And it was really interesting how they lay out the entire year about what you're going to plant in the early spring and what you're going to plant in the summer, what you're going to plant in the fall. And you're constantly rotating these crops. And they're even talking about these vegetables are hardy enough. And not just an onion, but a particular species of onion. You had to have hardy things stored back so that you could make it through the winter, and not only make it through, but you also want to thrive a little bit. Now, the king of all the simple ingredients that are cheap and easy to store, they can pack a lot of flavor into a dish, is the lowly onion. I've got a reading here that I found last night from a book called Cheap Repository Tracts by Hannah More, and this was in 1809. There's this little excerpt. They're talking about this woman and how she prepares for getting through the winter and how she takes care of her garden. And then in the end of the reading, it says, her onions she always carefully treasured up for her winter store. For an onion makes a little broth very relishing, and is indeed the only savory thing poor people are used to get. So not only are we talking about something that can give a lot of flavor, but this is something that everybody can have. No matter who you are, you can grow an onion. This makes a lot of sense if you stop to think about it. Other than having meat in a broth, what packs as much flavor into something as an onion? A clove of garlic does a lot. In the time period, especially in America, you don't see a lot of garlic in food. They're not using it nearly like we do today. It's like now, pretty much any meal you cook probably starts with a clove of garlic, but they weren't doing that in the time period, and you see it very little in the cookbooks. But onions, you see all over the place. Again, let's go back to our scenario from the very beginning of the video. You're moving out to the frontier. There's nobody else really around you for quite a ways. So you are dependent only on your property to give you what you need for winter. So you're storing back things like carrots and potatoes. You're storing back onions. You're going to dry herbs and you're going to store those back. You're going to have lots of grain. Now, if you want something to be nice and savory right away, the first thing you're going to grab is an onion, because it makes something savory just like sugar makes something sweet immediately. You put sugar in something, bam, it's sweet. You put an onion in something, it's the quickest way to get a rich, flavorful, savory dish. In this scenario, you are going to be planting onions all year long. There are going to be types of onions like scallions that you're just going to be using immediately. And then the hardiest ones, the ones that you can store back and will get really hard, that's what you're going to be storing for the winter time. And you're going to be picking not necessarily your root cellar, but the coldest, driest place that you have available to you. In the southern states, they were even saying that they would just put them in casks and they would store them in a bedroom or something like that because it was cool enough and dry enough. So when I was thinking about this video, the first book that came to mind is Professed Cook by B. Claremont. And I thought this is where my recipe is going to come from. And it ended up not being it, but I thought that this was really interesting. There's this section of the book where they list meager soups and meager sauces. And among them is an onion cullis. And it says slice as many onions, set them in a brisk fire with butter till it catches, 2 spoonfuls of flour, which you stir continually till it is well colored. And then you put broth, a glass of white wine, 2 heads of cloves, a bay leaf, and a bunch of other spices. So right here, this being a meager cullis, which we've done on the channel before, and it's this rich broth that you put a lot of time into, a lot of fat, and usually just a crazy amount of meat drippings. This does have broth and it does have fat, but the main component where the flavor's coming from is the onion. And that's why it's meager, because anybody can do this. Today we are making onion soup, and this recipe that I want to read first comes out of The English Art of Cookery by Richard Briggs. Another onion soup. Take half a pound of butter and put it into a stew pan. Melt it, cut 12 large onions in slices and fry them brown. Put in some flour and shake them about. Fry them a little longer, then pour in 3 pints of boiling water. Stir them around. Put the upper crust of a penny loaf cut in small pieces in, seasoned with pepper and salt, and stew it 15 minutes. Keep stirring it pretty often. Have ready the yolks of 3 eggs beaten fine, with half a spoonful of vinegar. Mix in some of the soup well with them, then mix all the soup together and pour it in a tureen. That's the recipe that we're going to go with today. It's perfect for this occasion, but I want to read this other one to you out of Elizabeth Cleland's book, A New and Easy Method of Cookery, just because it's a little closer to what we might think of as a modern French onion soup. It says, take some of the broth from a hog or beef and boil in it a dozen large onions, cut in slices, with black and Jamaica pepper, salt, and a bunch of sweet herbs. Thicken it with browned butter and flour and crumbs of bread. Take out your herbs before it goes to the table. Let there be some small whole onions boiled in it. This one is going to be so much more rich because of the beef or hog broth that you're putting in there. What I want to do today is we're pretending that we're in this scenario. We're just going to use water, onions, and butter. That's where our flavor's coming from. A little bit of salt and pepper. That's it. We're going to see what the most basic of onion soups tastes like, and if it would be something that we could consider a treat in a bleak winter situation. So first things first, we need to get to work cutting up these onions. You want them to be cut into strips. And then you're going to get some butter in a hot pan, and you're going to get that melted. We're not trying to scorch the butter, but it's going to turn into kind of like a brown butter thing in the end. After your butter's melted, you're going to put all of these onions in, and you're going to start to caramelize them. Don't be afraid of the onions getting brown, because that's what we're going for. We want brown onions. Once your onions get brown, you're going to add a little bit of flour, or quite a bit, depending on how thick you want your soup to be in the end. It's going to make kind of this onion juice butter roux with the onions. It's going to smell incredible. Once you've got your flour on there and they've simmered a little bit more, you're going to add your 3 pints of boiling water. And then once you do that, it's time to take a crust of bread. Get rid of anything that's soft. You just want the nice crusty part. And you're going to chop that up into bits. You're going to put that in there and let it simmer for a little while. While that's simmering, you're going to separate the whites and the yolks from 3 eggs. Discard the whites, and then you're going to put a little bit of vinegar. I said half a spoonful of vinegar, so vinegar to taste. Then you're going to grab some of that soup and you're going to put it into a small bowl, a separate container, to let it cool down a little bit. Pour it slowly into the eggs while you're stirring the whole time, and that's going to temper the eggs so that they don't cook when you pour them into the soup. And it's ready to serve. Just let it simmer, let it all combine a little bit, season it up with salt and pepper however you like, and it's ready to dish out. Can you imagine being up north where the winters are just treacherous? It's been weeks since you've seen anything green. The last leaves fell off the trees weeks ago, and you're getting stagnant. You're getting tired of the same old thing. And you go and you grab these onions that you've harvested, dried, and set apart for this purpose, and you're going to make this savory, delicious dish. When this was cooking, it filled the whole kitchen with some of the best smells. These onions just caramelizing. Who would want anything other than that on a bleak, cold day? And the dish looks amazing. It looks homey, it smells homey, it smells comforting, and I can't wait to dig in. Will this taste like what I know of a modern French onion soup? It has the components, except for there's no melted cheese kind of broiled on there. You could do that at home and that would take it the rest of the way. But we only used water, and this looks like it was made from a broth. It looks rich. This looks incredible. I can't wait to try this. That is delicious. It is the perfect winter survival food, and I know that you will love it.